Hi, welcome to the Chesapeake Biological Laboratories Next Generation Student Interview Series. I'm Sarah Brzezinski, the Outreach Coordinator at the Chesapeake Biological Laboratory. Today we'll be speaking with Alex Gibbs, who's a graduate student at the lab. Alex, hi, how are you doing?
I'm good, how are you?
I'm doing very well. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself? Where are you from?
I'm from Northern Virginia, the Woodbridge, DC area.
Oh, okay, so not too far away.
Nope, not far at all.
And can you tell me a little bit about what you wanted to be when you were young?
When I was really little, I wanted to be a marine biologist, but then I realized I was afraid of dolphins and turtles, so that didn't work out.
Aw. And were there any experiences in your childhood that kind of influenced you to go towards an environmental science career?
Yeah, I had a couple of different influences. When I was younger, I went snorkeling with my parents, and that's like kind of where I fell in love with the ocean and water and things like that. And my grandmother actually lived next to this really big coal ash retention pond, which is a big thing in North Carolina. And there were issues with pollution and things like that. And that's kind of like where the ball got rolling for me.
Oh, wow. When did you come to the Chesapeake Biological Laboratory, and what degree are you pursuing?
I came last fall, so fall of 2019. I'm getting my master's degree.
Oh, okay. So relatively recently.
Yes.
Why did you decide to come to the Chesapeake Biological Laboratory?
I really liked my advisor. So when I first started looking around, I found Solange, and I really, really liked her work. And something that was really important to me, like going on to grad school, was either to work under a woman of color or work under a woman or a person of color. And Solange happened to be both, and it was wonderful. And that was just something that was really important to me going forward in my career.
Oh, great. So Alex, what's it like working with Dr. Michael Gonsior and Dr. Solange Filoso?
I really enjoy working with them. I was kind of nervous because Michael is a chemist and I don't have the strongest chemistry background, but he's been really great at just kind of being like, hey, this is what you need to do, and then like also letting me work on my own. And Solange is really great. She's very supportive and trying to help me figure out either sample sites or like how am I going to sample, or if I mess something up, she's very gentle of being like, hey, like maybe next time like we'll do it this way. And that's been very, very helpful because coming into my master's, I was very nervous because, you know, you go from undergrad and you kind of like have not a support system, but you kind of have, you're used to what you're doing because I mean, you've been doing it for 4 years, and then you go in your new place, new lab, like you don't know how things work, but they've both been very supportive.
And what are you working on with them?
So I am looking to see if wetlands have the ability to either sequester or degrade pharmaceuticals or personal care products. And most of those are coming from septic systems that are leaking.
How do you go about doing that?
So I'll normally use a combination of GIS, which is a mapping technology, and basically I will see if there's septic systems in the area, and then see if there are wetlands in the area, and then I'll go out to those wetlands to see if they have those septic tracers in them.
You mentioned septic tracers. What are those?
So septic tracers can be a couple of different things. Some people use the old school tried and true way is to see if there was a fecal E. coli, which comes from after you use the bathroom and you flush it down your toilet and goes into your septic system. That can be released. But I'm looking at different ways. So I'm using like personal care products and pharmaceuticals. So things like some like anxiety medications, as well as like heart medications, as well as a couple of other different pharmaceuticals, things that aren't naturally produced by plants. Because some people think, oh, just use caffeine or things like that, but plants also naturally produce caffeine, so you can't do things like that. But you know, plants don't produce like grandma's cholesterol medication, so that's very obvious. Yeah. So those aren't things that you would naturally find in the environment. So if they're coming from somewhere, they're coming from human waste.
And why do we care if those things are in the environment?
There's evidence that some of these things can impact aquatic systems, and so they can either cause things to grow differently, things to not be able to reproduce properly, and so that becomes an issue later on when your populations are dropping.
Ah, okay, okay. So it can have long-term impacts on the population too.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty interesting. So what process do you actually use to find these chemicals? After you take a sample from a wetland, what do you do?
So I take them back to my lab, process them, get them all, got all the, you know, like the heavy, like turbidity, things like that taken out of them. And then we have this machine, it is called a triple quadruple mass spectrometer. And basically what that does, it tells us the different breakdowns of different compounds that are inside of the wetlands, and that can tell us of what's actually in the wetlands, as well as some of the things that they break down into. So like different metabolites and things like that.
So you're using advanced analytical and chemistry techniques to actually conduct this research.
Yes.
That's an amazing application. What is something about your research that you think other people would find surprising or particularly interesting?
Oh, that's a good question. I think that's like something that's kind of different about my research is a lot of people, when they think of scientists, they think of us like, in the lab, or like we're out like working with like sea turtles and like working with plastic and kind of very, the things that you see on TV. But like my job it's not as, I wouldn't say glamorous, because, sea turtles can bite and things like that. But I would say it's very, it's different. I'm spending a lot of my days like out in the mud, up to my ankle or up to my shins, honestly, sometimes, and just gooey wetlands that are, got a lot of crud and stuff in them. And I think it's not something people typically think of for a scientist, especially for a female scientist.
And do you enjoy getting out there?
Oh, I love it so much. When I was growing up, one of my favorite shows was Dirty Jobs, that show where the guy like goes through and like does all those gross jobs. And I'm like, oh, that's so cool. I wish I could like do that. And now I'm getting paid to do that, and it has like impactful research implications. So I really, really love it.
Oh, that's amazing. It's great when you can combine those passions and, really pursue a career that you love. So how do you think someone who isn't a scientist might find an interest in your research? Why should a non-scientist care about the things you're doing?
I think it's one of the bigger things, because especially now we're moving towards trying to get rid of older septic systems and going towards like everyone having sewage, which is managed by the state or by the county. And it's important for state or counties to know if these septic systems are leaking, because it kind of gives them more evidence of, hey, we should push more towards having sewer lines rather than these septic systems that have to be maintained constantly. And they're kind of like a little black box, because no one really knows, are they leaking? And once you figure out that they're leaking, it's because it's leaking everywhere kind of deal. So you want to know, ahead of time that these septic systems are leaking. Yeah.
Okay. So is there any advice that you would give to citizens in terms of your research? What sort of implications are there?
I think just the biggest takeaway for citizens is to, just know how important wetlands are, because that's the whole focus of my research, to see if wetlands are degrading these septic tracers. And that's just really important, because, wetlands, they may not be the most pretty thing, they may not smell the best, but at the same time, they're doing a lot of good things for the environment. So people should be campaigning to have these put in rather than having, more like asphalt parking garages or things like that. Just keep the wetlands where they are.
That's great. That's always a nice take-home message. Is there any advice that you would give to a younger person considering a career in a science, technology, engineering, or math field?
I would always, if you see something that looks interesting, I would always just email and reach out and say like, hey, could I talk to you for a couple of minutes? And as you get older, like high school, college age, ask to volunteer in either labs on your campus, or ask to volunteer just with people in the community. If you see something like a project going on, even just a cleanup, and you can ask, just volunteer. And then that's kind of how you get your way in and ask more and learn more.
That's great. And what sort of career do you hope to pursue after you get your graduate degree?
After this, I would like to take a couple of years and work in environmental consulting, and then go on to get my PhD. And after I do that, I would like to either do more environmental consulting, but like the big goal is to go into environmental policy. So come back to DC and do things like that, or just do policy anywhere. But
That would be great. That's a real way to put your research and your education into action.
yeah, definitely, because there aren't enough people involved in policy that have science backgrounds. So that's something that's always been really important to me.
And what is a skill that you've learned through your graduate education and research that you think you'll take with you through your career?
Definitely just being more confident with reaching out to either policymakers, or just reaching out to the community, because a lot of my sample sites they're like on people's private property. So just kind of, getting used to talking to people without a science background, and just kind of communicating what I'm trying to do. And I think that's very important, especially if I want to go into policy later on, just being able to reach out and talk to the public.
I always enjoy that too. So Alex, where would you like to be in 10 years and what sort of things would you like to be doing?
Oh, in 10 years, hopefully I will have finished my PhD. Fingers crossed. And I think I would like to just kind of be settled into my career. I think I would want to probably, in 10 years, I'd probably still be doing more environmental consulting or working for government in a laboratory, but kind of making that transition more towards policy. But I definitely want to have some good more years of field work before I'd like just trying to dive completely into policy.
That's great, Alex. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today.
It was great talking to you.
Well, it's been a real pleasure. And I wish you the best of luck in your studies and in continuing your research.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Have a nice day.
You too. Bye.
Bye.